is actually micro to physical things. So at a small fee, you get across all platforms because they're all digital, and all platforms are actually able to get some revenue depending on the reach. And you can also see even the sort of the pace. For example, you said some of the people have 2 million followers, and if they actually put it through, you agree on a fee. So it's a way that you can actually ensure this digital version of these arts, and they're actually given out equitably to willing partners.
I will not take you further on that. Rights for airing important events like, international sports, and you're coming from that background. What's your opinion? How should we be distributing such rights? For example, we have AFCON coming up, World Cup, and the likes.
No, thank you, Honorable Nyamita, through the chair. Events of national interest is actually a very, very common thing across. And in our particular country, part of the KICA Act has a section that talks to the events of national interest. For example, if the national team is actually playing Harambee Stars versus Nigeria, that is an event of national interest because the national team which subscribes to all Kenyans is actually playing. What does the law say? The law says that the first point, the public broadcaster will actually be given the first rights for events of national interest. Because if you look at the KBC Act, part of it is actually to disseminate information of public interest, including government information. So KBC is then given as a right. And Honorable Nyamita just put a right. And I have actually had the privilege of going for about 4 World Cups live. And one of it, with the privilege, we actually were with the Honorable Chair in his capacity. World Cup, again, the way the rights, FIFA actually apportions rights. They apportion the rights for free-to-air, which are actually by right given to the public broadcaster. So KBC, by Act, is actually given those rights. And then the next rights are actually commercial, which are paid commercially. And then the public can either watch on the public broadcaster or on the commercial channel, depending on where they wish. You will actually agree, Honorable Chair, through you, that all the World Cups, you will actually watch KBC. You might have a challenge of the quality if some other people are broadcasting in HD and the KBC one is probably tethering, that might be the issue. But otherwise, rights are actually, national interest events are actually one that the public should actually access, and it's covered under our regulation. And it's something I will actually encourage to be maintained.
Chair, I'll ask my next question in the final round.
Thank you, Honorable Nyamita, for your magnanimity. I want to give this opportunity to the Honorable County MP for Isiolo. Mheshimiwa Mumina, engage the nominee.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. My questions will largely touch on young people.
Thank you.
As you know, the digital world presents both opportunities and challenges for youth, offering access to information, education, and connection, but also exposing them to risks like cyberbullying, privacy violation, and harmful content. So with that in mind, I want to ask this. What is your stance on digital surveillance and privacy rights in Kenya? Because we want to increase opportunities for the youth in this space and minimize the challenges and the risks that they get exposed to. Because this is largely their space. So my first question, what is your stance on digital surveillance and privacy rights in Kenya?
Thank you. Through the chair, the honorable member for Isiolo, that I congratulate for actually representing ably the youth in this honorable house, is asking about, obviously, that youth are actually very apt in this digital space. They're very, very active. And indeed, in the process, some of them might fall sort of prey into either cyber crimes, cyber attacks, and bullying, as she actually states. And then she then turns and says, what is my opinion around digital surveillance or digital stamping surveillance, which is basically a way of tracking activity online. First of all, the Honorable Chair, to say, like I said earlier, media freedom and use of any of these communication avenues is absolutely protected in the Constitution. So the youth are actually properly exercising their right to information, to access information, and I know the government is trying to ensure that through digital platforms, they actually get them as low as possible. That's where the internet, digital internet touch points are actually being taken to the counties. Number two, if in the course of use, and I think it's a very good way of youth using their energy and creativity, in the course of use, some of them are actually falling prey into attacks. That's where government comes in. That's where the law enforcement comes in. And there's different ways of actually doing it. If you actually look, if it's a digital platform, a digital pooling, you then have to use digital means to actually A, detect, B, counter or arrest. And it's a case where we need a balance between privacy, because the youth who are actually exercising and using these platforms are absolutely entitled to privacy, as is actually stated in the Data Protection Act. So their own activities, including any personal information, is protected. Even as the government or any of the centers like the one we have at the CA is actually checking for cybercrime and bullying, we must protect privacy. Number two, if we then find that our own youth are being molested, and we've also seen sometimes in the newspapers all sorts of scamming and attacks, I think it's incumbent on the cybercrime unit, which is actually a multi-agency unit covering all our state agencies that cover security and also communications, that A, they've got the right tools to check, B, they deal with only cybercrime, not interfering with the use of the online platforms. So to Honorable Chair, we have to balance between letting the youth use the channels freely without being infringed, and then B, ensure that we're protecting them in case there's any threats of infringement. It's really a balance.
Thank you. My second question is, how will the State Department support the creative economy, especially young innovators in the digital space? And this is where we are thinking of increasing the opportunities for them. So how are we going to support the creative economy and innovation in that space?
Okay. Thank you, through the chair. I think the youth are obviously the current, not the future, but they're really the current most important stakeholder in the country. In terms of the state enabling the youth to actually enhance the creative economy and participate in that space, our role as a regulator and government and policy is actually to ensure that we roll out the commitment of the Kenya Kwanza Manifesto in terms of a digital superhighway, that in fact the 100,000 kilometer fiber optic is actually fulfilled. And in terms of digital economy, the last mile, particularly where the youth, because the last mile is where you make contact between the consumer and the usage, where the government has also proposed 1,450 digital hubs based at the wards, are actually all actualized, and that there are digital Wi-Fi hotspots, because once you have Wi-Fi, you're actually online. And number two, supplemented by private network coverage, where you've got proper network in the rural areas, 3G, 4G. Once that network is established, as I said earlier, my role is, for example, to use the Kenya Institute of Mass Communication and other private training agencies to empower youth with, for example, how do you produce content? How do you even do a user-generated content? How do you actually make your content attractive to go viral? And I said earlier, one of my thoughts is actually switch the KIC from being a physical brick and mortar just based physically at South Sea to a digital or online-based college where they can literally train across the country to interested youth, and in the process get many more enrolled users, and in that way you then empower them to actually use. The last one is actually around tax and also any other incentives. Just to make sure, for example, the usage of digital hubs is actually put at the lowest cost denominator, whether it's a Wi-Fi enablement, with actually access to those digital hubs. They have to be as affordable as possible to ensure our youth, who necessarily are actually trying to establish, have access to this information.
Through the chair, Mr. Stephen, you really made a good attempt on answering that. But I represent an area where telecommunication infrastructure is not really well established. We are still struggling with cellular connection. We've not really gotten to a space where we can enjoy digital technology and the space that we are talking about, where you are now elaborately explaining how you will have youth supported to grow in that economy. What do you do with young people who come from such an area where there are no roads, there are no telecommunication network, there's nothing actually to connect them? Will you just leave them there? Or what intention do you have for them? It's a follow-up question.
Thank you, through the chair. The Honorable Member for Isiolo asks a very, very relevant question around our ability or commitment to actually be equitable and cover the whole country. She raises questions around areas where you actually literally do not have cell phone coverage. You actually do not have any of this digital tech that we're talking about. Honorable Member, the people from those marginalized areas are also Kenyans. The youth from those areas also deserve equal sort of opportunity to be able to access these services. What I'll do, if approved and successful, is actually, like I said earlier, engage with the Universal Service Fund, which is actually sitting with the regulator, to actually say, and obviously ensure that I'm engaging with the committee to actually ensure that I get details around those unserved areas. Once we understand them and where the gaps are, the intention is actually to use that USF, and that's what USF was established for, to ensure that we can actually be able to establish access of those services through other means. For example, via satellite, if physically it's long distances and all that, there is actually other technology-enabled means to activate those networks and ensure that those same Kenyans and youth, for that matter, have an equal privilege and access like the youth from urban centers and other privileged areas. So it's a commitment, Honorable Member, I'll make to follow through.
The Honorable Member is keen to know on practical steps.
Yes.
You might not be able to gloss over that because your office existed.
Yeah.
There have been PSS there. USF exists. It has been funded for many years, but still her corner of the world is not covered. So beyond the generalities, what are the actual steps you think are required to make sure that USF covers her?